Hello everyone, I am C. Ashish Sarna on behalf of GM Test Series, and today we are going to discuss the mistakes students commit in income tax. Let's start with the test series. Question 1. Mr. Ankit engaged the business of wholesale trade has a turnover of 90 lakhs for previous year 2019-20 and rupees 20 lakh for the preceding previous year 2019-20. In the previous year 920, he paid salary of rupees 3 lakh to Mr. Hari, a resident without TDS, and commission of 25,000 to Rajesh, a resident without TDS. The discount under section 40AI will be, so in the previous year turnover was less than 1 CR, so it's not the auditable case. So or 2 CR as a case may be. So this is not an auditable case. And for commission 194H, it says that if the previous year, the preceding year was non-auditable case, and this is the first year in which audit is to be conducted, then there would be no disallowance if TDS has not been deducted. So commission of rupees 25,000, no TDS deducted. Then also no deduction, no disallowance under section 40A will be done. And for the salary part, it is salary is less than, if in the present year the limit is such that if the salary is less, if your total income is less than 5 lakh, there's no requirement of any tax to be paid. So if there is no tax liability, so no TDS will be deducted. So the answer will be nil. Which of the following can be treated as profit derived from business or undertaking to qualify for deduction in section 80 IB? Transport subsidy, duty drawback subsidy, interest subsidy, power subsidy. For this, we have a direct circular dated, circular number 39 of 2016, which says that revenue subsidies will qualify as will fall within the definition of profit derived from business or undertaking. So, which are the revenue? It says the revenue subsidies. So, and it has specifically stated that transport, interest, and power subsidy will qualify as profits derived from, and also uh, duty drawback receipts are not profit derived from. An explanation to this can be given that these are tax related subsidies, these are not profit derived from. And but on the other side, transport, interest, and subsidy, there are revenue expenditures, and if any subsidy is given on behalf of these, then these will qualify as profit derived from. So the answer is 1, 3, and 4, and also on the basis of circular also. Question number 3. Sudesh Limited, an Indian company, commenced business on 1/2/2020. It incurred preliminary expenses of rupees 35 lakh during the period 1/4/2019 to 31/3/2020. The cost of project is 5 CR. The following are the details on 31/3/2020. Issued share capital 3 CR, share premium 50, debentures 1, long-term borrowings 2. We have to calculate the deduction of section 35D. First of all, for the deduction of section 35D, we have to see whether it's a company or not. It is a company case, so the deduction will be allowed for the next 5 years when the business commences to the extent of 5% of the capital employed, where the capital employed is share capital plus debentures plus long-term borrowings, in which share premium, that is share surplus reserves, will not be included. So the deduction will be, otherwise if it was not a company, then the deduction would have been 5% of the cost of project for the next 5 years. But in the present case, it's a company, so 5% of the capital employed will be allowed. So 3 CR plus 1, 6, 6 divided by 6 into 5%, that is 30 lakhs. 30 lakhs divided by 5 years, that in each year deduction of rupees 6 lakhs will be allowed. So answer is B. Mira is a eligible startup engaged in the eligible business. Its gross total turnover, eligible profit, included profit of rupees 25 lakh from such business. The assessing officer may disallowance of rupees 3 lakh under section 40 IA and or rupees 2 lakhs under section 43B. The deduction allowable under section 80 IAC would be, so deduction. First of all, let me tell you the answer. Then I will directly come to the reason for that. The answer will be 25 plus 3 plus 2. Deduction allowed under section 80 IAC will be 30 lakhs. If there's a direct circular on that, circular number 37 2016, which says that in case of any disallowance by the assessing officer relating to the business disallowances such as 40A3, 40, 43, 40AIA, 43B, 40A, A3, 32, or any other business disallowances have been made by the assessing officer, then they will automatically become a part of the profits, and these profits are business, which are obviously allowed for deduction. So if this deduction business related expenses are disallowed, then these become the part of the profits. So profits are obviously allowed under section 80 series. So the deduction will be 30 lakhs. In course of search under section 132 in the month of May 2020, Mr. Rakesh makes a declaration in section 132 on the earning of income not disclosed in respect of previous year 2019-20. He also explains the manner in which he has derived such income, and he also pays a tax with interest on such income, declares such income in the return of income filed by him in the month of June 2020. So the penalty level will be, so in this case, we have to see the date of search. Date of search is May 2020. So in case a search has been conducted after 15 December 2016, then the penalty leviable will be 30% or 60% as the case may be. If the person makes a declaration during the course of search only and explain the manner in which he has derived and pays the taxes also before the return, then penalty will be 30%. Otherwise, the penalty would be 60%. So in the present case, earlier it was 10, 20, and 60%. But after 15 December 2016, the case it has been like that the penalty shall be compulsorily leviable of 30% or 60%. In this case, since he has explained the manner in which he has derived and pays the taxes also, this is not something which is obtained by the officer during the course of assessment. It is voluntary disclosure made by the Mr. Rakesh. So penalty will be 30%. Would be detective makes voluntarily made a declaration section 132.4. Yes. Question number 6. A private bank has not filed a statement of financial transaction or reportable account in relation to the specified financial transaction for the financial year 2019-20. A notice was issued by the prescribed income tax authority on 1st October 2020, requiring the bank to furnish the statement by 31st October 2020. The bank, however, furnished the statement only on 15th November 2020. Would be the rate of penalty livable under section 271 FA? My friends, the date on which the report should have been furnished, that's the time limit. That's the due date is 31st May of the next year. For the financial year 1920, the date is May 31st, 2020. So, so this statement has not been furnished, so the penalty will be levied. So, and moreover, one thing we have to consider, there are two slabs, 500 and 1000. Till the date, we have not filed the financial statement, financial report, financial transaction. The penalty is 500 rupees per day. And in case the notice has been issued by the income tax authority to furnish, and by the date given in the notice, we have not furnished the information, then after that date, penalty of 1000 will be levied. So in this case, the information should have been furnished by 31st May, but the information furnished on 15th November. And also the point to be considered is that the the bank issued statement, the income tax authority has issued notice on 31st on 1st October to furnish the statement by 31st October. So till 31st October, rupees 500 will be charged per day, and after that, rupees 1000 will be charged till the information is furnished by the private bank. So June, July, August, September, October, the number of days will be 153. 153 into 500 rupees, that will be 76,500. And for the next 15 days, we have to take 15th November also, because that was also the default date. So 15 into 1000, that is 15,000. So the total will be 91,500. So the penalty that will be charged is 91,500 rupees. Next, Mr. Ritesh wants to make an application for previous year 19 under section 245C to the settlement commission. Additional income shown in the application is 65 lakh. For the previous year 18-19 return was filed, and rupees 35 lakh was shown as income tax, was income in the return, and so tax was paid. Calculate the additional tax to be paid. This is a very simple question. Whenever we are going to file an application to settlement commission, we have to pay the entire tax amount, and the minimum income to be disclosed is 50 lakhs. Always we have to keep that in mind. So now he has already disclosed income of 35 lakhs plus 65 lakhs. That's a very logical question. Is that we have to deposit the entire tax amount, and the total income is 1 crore. So we have to deposit the entire tax amount on 1 CR. And we have already deposited 8,88,375. And the average tax rate that will be for an individual, for the tax rate will be around 32.17. So on 1 CR, the average tax is around 32.17. That is 32 lakh 17,500 tax. That is the entire amount that should have been paid. But in this case, we have already paid 8,88,375. So if we deduct this amount, that will be, the answer will be point A. So the answer is 23,29,125. So it's a very logical question. It's just that we have to deposit the entire tax amount before filing the application. And the credit will be given for the tax amount that we have already paid. Mona Limited is a shoe making company. It acquired a knife of rupees 15,000. Whether this expenditure is capital or revenue in nature. For expenditure to be capital or revenue, it depends upon the nature of the company and the amount we have spent. A single knife for 15,000 for a shoe making company, the nature of the company side, it is going to make shoe, and 15,000 is such a huge amount for a knife. So if we go by the logical reasoning, this has to be a capital expenditure only, because this is going to be used for a longer duration. 15,000, a knife of 15,000 is not going to be used only for once. So if it is used for a longer duration, and the nature is also shoemaking company, because a knife is a common thing that is used in a shoemaking company, because the nature is such that. So the expenditure is capital. Mr. Khali made an application to Settlement Commission on 9/9/2019, and it was subsequently accepted by the Settlement Commission. Which of the following person cannot make application after Khali made it? Khali himself, firm with which Khali is entitled to 25% of the profit, private company if in which Khali holds 52% shares, HUF and Khali is a Karta. Friends, if an application is made, this question is governed by section 245K of Income Tax Act. So the section says if an application is made, once the application is made, a subsequent application cannot be made by the assessee himself, his HUF in which he is a karta, and in a company or a firm in which he has entitled to profits of more than 50%, or substantial shareholder in a private company in which he holds shares of around of more than 50%. So that is pretty clear as per the language of the section. So the answer is also clear. Khali himself cannot file. Firm in which Khali, private company in which Khali holds 50%, this company can also not file. HUF of a Khali is a in which he is a karta, that also cannot file. So the answer is two. So the answer, so the correct, so only the person who can file is option two, and the correct answer is C, because these three persons cannot file the subsequent application. Khali himself, private company, and HUFs. Mrs. Dream Homes is interior decorator proprietorship submitting the following details of 3 years immediately preceding the previous year, 1920. Previous year is so and so. There are three previous years. Gross receipts and so and so. Income from profession, total income. Now we have to upon the applicability of section 44A and rule 6F regarding the maintenance of books. 44AA1 makes it clear that in case of profession of interior decorators, it is pretty clear as per the definition, as per the language of the act, that if it is an interior decorator, then he has to maintain books as per section 44AA. But rule 6F specifically states that if any of the previous 3 years, in this current year is 1920 and the previous years are the given above, in these 3 years, if any of the year, if the receipts is less than 1.5 lakh, then he is exempt as per rule 6F. So the answer will be the SSC C point. The SSC is entitled to maintain books of accounts as per section this. Yes, clear. But it is exempted under rule 6F since his gross receipt do not exceed 1.5 lakh in previous year 2016-17. It is again I'm mentioning that in any of the previous 3 years, not last year, not last year, in any of the 3 years. So the in 16-17, the gross receipts were 1.39 lakh, which is less than 1.5 lakh. Yes. Next question. On 1/4/2019, Tino Limited of Delhi, a domestic company engaged in the business of manufacturing of metro rail seats, converted into an LLP by name MS Tenny LLP, fulfilling all the conditions specified in section 47(10)(3)(b) of the Income Tax Act. Some of the relevant information is given below. Voluntary retirement scheme VRS by the company paid is 20 lakh. The company allowed deduction of is 4 lakh for each of the previous year 2017, 18, 18, 19 under section 35 DDA. 150 shares of Tokyo Limited, an Indian company listed in Bombay Stock Exchange, were acquired in for rupees 1900 per share on 31/7/2031. Conversion dates, they become the property of Tanmay Limited. Beside other assets, Tanmay Limited LLP by transferred to Tanmay by Mrs. Tino Limited. It also transferred two buildings. On 1/4/2019, Tanmay LLP leased out one building along with plant and machineries furniture at a consolidated lease rent of rupees 50,000 per. So that means he is having 50,000 lease rent income. Right. During the previous year 2019-20, Mr. Tanmay LLP earned a profit of so and so after debit credits from the following items to P&L account. As I'm saying the question, we are also going to discuss the answer simultaneously. Mr. Tinu is working partner LLP. He's also working partner in another firm. He's actually engaged in business of both the firms. Tinu gets a salary of 50,000 per month from Saumya LLP and also is authorized in the deed of LLP. So 25 lakh 40,000 income is derived after deducting the salary. First of all, we'll add back the salary, and then as per Income Tax Act, we have to calculate what is the eligible amount of the salary. Like 90% of the first 3 lakh book profit, and then we have to calculate subsequently 60% of the rest of the profit. That is the maximum limit for the salary. So this we will add back. Mr. Ayush, an employee, was deputed to work in a client's office in Mumbai for 3 months. The LLP has paid him salary in cash for the months when he was in Mumbai, amounting to 3,45,000 net of TDS and other deduction. Since he did not have any bank account in Mumbai, the payment was included in salary debited to profit and loss account. Mr. Ayush is normally posted in Delhi, being the headquarter of Tanmay LLP. So the salary has been paid in cash, but TDS has been deducted and other deductions has been properly followed. But he has not, he has been paid in cash. But as per rule 6D double D, if there's a genuine reason and SSC did not have any bank account, like he did not have any bank account in Mumbai, he was temporarily employed, so he will be covered by the exceptions under section 6 double D. Amount of 20,000 was paid towards penalty for non-fulfillment of delivery conditions of contract for sale for the reason beyond control. So this is allowed. Only the penalty for the violations of the laws is not allowed. But this is the penalty which is being paid for non-fulfillment of delivery conditions of the contract for sale. So this is allowed. LLP has provided an amount of 18 lakh, being a sum estimated as payable to workers based on agreement to be entered with workers union towards periodical wage revision once a year. The provision is based on a fair estimate of wage and reasonably certainty of revision once a year. So this is also allowed because there can be a proper provision of wages payable. There is no contravention if we are providing a provision for wages payable. So this is also allowed as per ICDS rules. Income disclosure. Depreciation debited to P&L. First of all, we are going to add it back, and then the eligible amount as per Income Tax Act will be deducted later on. Gratuity provisions on actual valuation rupees 6.5 lakh. Gratuity actually paid rupees 4 lakh. So in this case, as per section 48.7, only the gratuity paid will be allowed as deduction, not the provision. Profit on sale of shares, this will also be added back because this is capital gain income and we are going to do a separate calculation for that. Repair to plant and machinery includes 59,000. This will also be added back because we have a lease rent income of 50,000 per month. From that it will be deducted. Lease rent is other source income and this will be deducted from other source income because it is specifically and directly related to that income. Factory lease license fees paid, again this will be added back because it is related to the lease asset. Legal fees also, this will also added back because it is specifically related to the lease agreement. Additional information. Under an agreement that restructuring bank has converted unpaid interest amounting to rupees 9 lakh up to 31/7/2019 into a new loan account repayable in 3 equal installments. The first installment was paid in March 2020 by debiting the new loan account. In this case also the actual, as per section 43B, only the actual interest paid will be allowed as deduction. So in the current year, only out of 9 lakh we have paid 3 lakhs because 3 installments has been done. So 3 lakh will be allowed as deduction. Mr. Tino, being a working partner, bought a car which is written in his own name out of funds of LLP. The car is used for business. The depreciation car is 15,000 for previous year to 1920, which is not including depreciation. So this will be deducted from the profit because this asset is exclusively used for the purpose of business. Depreciation as per income tax rules 8 lakh 10,000 including depreciation on asset given on lease amounting to rupees 90,000. It does not include it does not include depreciation on car. In this case, the eligible depreciation shall be, as per income tax, shall be 8,10,000 minus 90,000, and this 90,000 shall be directly reduced from the lease rent income, because this is directly related to, this is expense directly related to lease income earned by the cessee. LLP sold entitlements as in for rupees 1,50,000. So this is going to be the income of a cessee. This is the PGBP income as per section 28 of Income Tax Act. Let's go to the solution now. Let's see whether we could write. Yeah. Transfer of a capital asset or intangible asset by a private company or listed company to LLP or and so is not regarded as transfer section, provided the conditions therein are satisfied. According to transfer by Team Limited is not regarded as transfer since the condition section as stated stands satisfied and fulfilled. So it is not a transfer because all the condition has been specified, and it has been specially mentioned in the question that all the conditions for the transfer to make it a transfer, which is to specifies condition all the conditions specified in the section 47, 10, 13b, because it satisfies all the conditions. So it is not a transfer as per section 47. Profit and gain. PGBP income is 24,40,000. Salary will be added back first of all, and later on it will be allowed. Salary paid to Ayush. There is no contribution of 40A3 because SS is covered by Rule 6DD. Penalty for non-fulfillment delivery. There's no problem in that because it is not related to any law. Provision of wages also allowed, and as ICDS 10 require reasonable certainty for the recognition of a provision, which is present in the present case. Depreciation as per books of account, it will be added back and later on allowed as per Income Tax Act. Provision for gratuity as per section 40A7, only 4 lakh will be allowed. So the difference will be added back. Repair to plant and machine given on lease. This is directly related to the other source income. So that will be reduced from the other source income of lease rent of 50,000 per month. Same reason for factory license fees paid. Same reason for legal fees to advocate for drafting. And profit on sale of import entitlements. It's a PGBP income, so it will be added to the income of the cessee. Now, this is something important. This capital gain was included in the business income, so we have to reduce it. Profit on sale of shares, 1,27,000. There will be a separate treatment for this. Voluntary retirement scheme that was given initially in the question. 1/5 deduction is available in respect of payment for voluntary retirement scheme for 5 years when a private company or listed company is headed by the LLP fulfilling the conditions laid in section 47. Then deduction in respect of voluntary retirement scheme is available to the LLP for the balance years for the years of succession. However, hence the deduction of rupees 4 lakh is allowable in this year because it's a third year. Interest paid during the year that we have already discussed, only the actual interest paid will be allowed as deduction. Deduction motor car, yes, it was exclusively used for the business purpose. Depreciation as per income tax rules, it was 7,20,000 because 90,000 will be deducted from the lease rent income. Now the calculation of the book profit comes to 26,77,500. Now for the remuneration thing, pay to Tinu on first 3 lakhs 90% or 1,50,000, whichever is higher, and the balance 60%. So the calculation, if we do, we'll get the profit which will exceed the actual remuneration paid, that is 6,60,000. So actual remuneration paid will be allowed a deduction. Now the capital gain part. Sale consideration is 150 into 270 per share, less cost of acquisition 150 into rupees. So this is the important part. We have to take the higher of the value the actual cost of acquisition or the value of shares as on 31/3/2018, 1900 rupees was the actual cost of acquisition, or 2500 being lower of fair market value as on 31/3/2018. Full value of the consideration is 2700 per share. So we are going to take 2500. So 150 into 2500 rupees. So the long term capital gain will be 37,500. And also it is long term because the shares are held for more than 12 months. Now this is from lease rent income, 50,000 into 12, 6 lakh. Repair will be deducted, factory license fees will be deducted, legal fees and depreciation on this asset will be deducted. So the gross total income will be 24 lakh 65,000. Yes. Next question. Would an assessee who entered into agreement with Gujarat State Road Development Corporation for an infrastructure development project to be entitled to deduction of Section 80 IA4, even though as per requirement contained, the agreement has to be entered with central government or state government or local authority or any other statutory body? For this, a simple thing has to be considered whether the Gujarat State Road Development Corporation is a central government body or a state government body or local authority government body or any other statutory body, or even if it is governed by any of these: central government, state government, local authority. So for this, let me take you to another screen. Yes. For that, we need to first consider the facts of the case. The assessee is a private limited company engaged in implementing infrastructure development projects. That is for sure, that is clear. For the relevant assessment, it is claimed deduction of this so and so amount. The assessee contended that it has undertaken a road project for which it has entered into agreement. It's a case law. And first of all, we need to consider the facts of the case and then whether the deduction should be allowed, and then we will correlate with the present question. The assessing contender has undertaken a road development project for which it has entered into agreement with the Gujarat State Road Development Corporation, which was set up by the government for special purpose. In this case, the learner doubted whether such agreement would satisfy the requirement of 80 IA4. The assessee, however, contended they're performing all the functions and everything. Relevant thing. What the court has said that the High Court observed that GSRDC is a owned wholly government owned company incorporated pursuant to the state government's resolution dated so and so. This memorandum essentially shows that government enjoys total control over this corporation. GSRDC was considered by the state government as a nodal agency for the purpose of executing road development projects through private participation. Hence, it is a government agency as defined as Section 2E. So, High Court has simply held that since it has entered an agreement with GSRDC, a government agency constituted by the state government for the purpose of executing roads development projects, it is entitled to deduction under Section 80 IA4. So, this case law has been settled by the High Court, in which it is clearly observed that it is a government body and it is governed by a government, state government, and It is a government agency as defined in Section 2E of the Gujarat Infrastructure Development Act 1999. So, since it is a government agency, so as per it qualifies the definition of ATIA 4, so it is entitled to deduction under Section ATIA. Yes. Next question. Yeah. Specify with reason whether the following act can be considered tax planning, tax management, tax evasion. Friends, we have to consider that in tax evasion there is act of fraud which is not legally allowed. Tax planning is reducing the tax amount by remaining by acting as per law and remaining within the framework of legal act, that is Income Tax Act 1961. Tax management is something very simple, that is we are managing the tax. That's it. There's no reduction in tax, there is no fraudulent act in this. So Mr. X deposits rupees 1 lakh in PPF account so as to reduce his total income from 5 lakh 90,000 to 4 lakh 90,000. So this is a clear act of tax planning because as we go by the definition, there is a reduction of tax by remaining within the framework of the act. So this is tax planning. Next, Mr. MDH Limited maintains register of tax deduction at source affected by it to enable timely compliance. So there is only management. There is no reduction of tax. There's no tax evasion. So this is only a management thing. Next, individual taxpayer making tax saver deposit of 1 lakh in nationalized bank. Again, it will lead to a deduction of tax by remaining within the framework of the act. So this is also tax planning. This is all tax planning. Next, a partnership firm obtained declaration from lender depositing form number 15G, 15H and forwarding the same to the income tax authorities. So this is again a tax management only because there's no reduction of tax, there's no act of fraud in this. So this is tax management. A company installed an air conditioner costing to 75,000 at the residence of a director as per terms of a appointment, but treat it as fitted in quality control section in the factory. This is with the object to treat as planned for purpose of computed depreciation. This is clearly an act of fraud which is not legally permitted, not permissible as per Income Tax Act 1961. So this is an act of fraud. So this is tax evasion. PP Limited issued a credit note of for rupees 80,000 as brokerage payable to Mr. Rama, who is son of managing director of the company. The purpose is to increase the total income Rama from 4 lakh to 25,000 and reduce the income of PP Limited corresponding. Again, this is something which is not allowed. This is clearly an act of tax evasion. Issuing of a credit note of this as a brokerage payable to Mr. Rama, the son of managing director, to increase his total income from 4.2, 4.3, reduce the income of the company. The company is liable to a flat rate of 30 or 25% as the case may be, but Rama is not liable to any tax. So this is something not liable. This is an act of fraud. This is not tax planning. This is not reducing the tax within the framework of Income Tax Act. So this is something not allowed. So this is clearly tax evasion. Next question. A company remitted provident fund contribution of both its own contribution and employees contribution on a monthly basis before the due date. So this is again a tax management. Tax management. It is only a compliance of law. That's it. There is no reduction of tax. There is no act of fraud in this. So this is a clear act of tax management. The next question is question 5. For the assessment year 1920, Mr. John was directed to carry out special audit of his accounts under section 142A on 1 8 2019 without giving an opportunity of being heard. Now, the first question is, can the assessee contend that his reasonable opportunity of being heard is not provided to him by the assessing officer? Such notice requiring the special audit of accounts is not valid? Yes, of course. The most important thing in income tax is the reasonable opportunity of being heard is to be given to the assessee. And that is, if that is not given, the entire proceedings will be void ab initio. The most important thing is the net principles of natural justice needs to be followed in the entire assessment proceedings. So if that has not been done, the entire assessment will be void ab initio. Second, what is the due date by which the audit report has to be submitted, including the extended time? That is 180 days, including the extended time. That will start from 1/8/2019. If the assessee intentionally does not comply with the directions, how much penalty? The penalty will be 10,000 for each non-compliance or not following the directions. Rupees 10,000 will be levied on him. For failure to get the books audited under Section 110, can prosecution be launched against the assessee if just the quantum of punishment for such default? Yes, that can be done, and the punishment will be that can be extended to 1 year of imprisonment, and that is governed by section that is governed by section 276D. And the next question is that whether the prosecution, whether the settlement commission, whether it can approach to the settlement commission. Yes, he can go to settlement commission. Settlement commission can grant him exemption from immunity from penalty and prosecution, and provided the conditions of settlement filing an application before the settlement commission is fulfilled. That is, if the additional amount of income tax payable on income tax disclosed in the settlement application exceeds 50 lakhs, where the assessee is the subject matter of search, and 10 lakh and other cases. And also the point need to be considered that the search, if the settlement is satisfied that he is cooperated with the proceedings before it makes a true disclosure of income, the manner in which such income has been derived, it may grant to such person immunity from penalty and prosecution for failure to comply with the directions. And one thing also that has to be considered, however, the settlement commission cannot grant immunity from prosecution where the prosecution has been launched before the date of receipt of application under section 245C. Now the next question. What would be the penalty level under section 270A in case of the following? In the following cases, if none of the additional disclosures made in the assessment or arrangement qualify under section 270A6 and the underreporting of income is not on account of misreporting. So there in section 278 there are two type of penalties: underreporting and misreporting. In case of misreporting, 200% of the tax amount will be levied. In case of underreporting, 50% of the tax amount will be levied. So, particular of this, there are two forms. That means we have two questions, separate questions for that. And Mr. Alpha resident firm, as per returned 139 135 lakh, determined section 143 1A 45 lakh, assessed under section 143 3 62, reassessment of section 147 81 lakh. For this, yeah. Mr. Alpha is deemed to have underreported his income since the income assessed under section 143.3 exceeds his income determined in the return process under section 143.1, and the income reassessed under section 147 exceeds the income assessed under section 143.3. So the penalty will be of underreporting, and this will be the calculation. Total income assessed under section 143.3, 62 lakh. Total income determined under section 143.1, 45 lakh. Tax payable of underreported income. There's no misreporting, there's underreporting of 17 lakh. So For this calculation, first of all, we have to calculate the actual tax that would have been paid in case the income was 62 lakh, and then we have to less total income as determined in section 143(1)(a). So tax on underreported income 17 lakh plus total income of 45 lakh, that is 62 lakhs, is 19 lakh 34,400, less tax on total income determined in section 143(1), 30% of 45 lakhs, that the actual amount that has disclosed, that the SSC has disclosed. So the tax amount is 5,30,400. So the penalty is will be 50%, that is 2,65,200. And subsequent proceedings has been initiated under section 147. For that, also since it's a case of underreporting, 50% of the underreported tax will be the penalty. For this calculation will be like that: total income research under section 147, 81 lakh. Total income assessed under 143.3, 62 lakh. So the additional income is 19 lakh. So now the tax calculation: tax on underreported income 19 lakhs plus total income of 62 lakhs, that is 25 lakh 27,200, less the tax on total income assessed in section 143, that is 30% of 62 lakhs, 19 lakh 34,400. So the penalty will be half of this amount, 2 lakh 96,400. And for the second part of the question is beta company. As per return of income, there was loss of 12 lakh determined under section 143(1)(a), 6 lakh. So 6 lakh was the income. So the tax remaining, so the loss remaining was 6 lakh. Income assessed under section 143(3), 4 lakh. So the loss remains 2 lakh. So there was disallowance or addition of 4 lakh. And other reassessment under section 147, the income assessed was 6 lakh, that is addition of 8 lakhs, 2 lakh of loss plus 6 lakhs of income. So the solution for this will be beta is determined to have underreported income since the assessment of section 143(3) has effect of reducing the loss determined in the return processed under section 143(1)(a), and reassessment under section 147 has effect of converting the loss assessed under section 143(3) into income. Therefore, the penalty is leveled under section 270(a) for underreporting of income. Computation will be like that: loss under section 143(3), 2 lakh, less loss determined in section 143(1), 143(1)(a), 6 lakh. So the additional income is 4 lakh. Tax on this income will be 1,20,000 plus surcharge. So the penalty will be only 50%, 62 lakh 40,000. And subsequently, there was 147 proceedings also. And the total income size was 6 lakhs. Less loss will be, the income will be 8 lakh. That is 2 lakh loss plus 6 lakhs income that has been assessed by the assessing officer. So the tax will be 2 lakh 49,600 additional tax to be paid, and the penalty will be 50%, that is 1,24,800. And also note the applicable tax rate for Beta Limited Trading Company for assessment 2021 is 30%. Since its turnover is for the previous year 2017, it exceeds 400 crores. That's a disclaimer over here. Yes. Next question. The merger of a loss-making company with a profit-making one results in losses, setting off profits, a lower net profit, and a lower tax liability for the merged company. Both the losses be disallowed by allowing GAR. Whenever there's a, we have to consider that whenever there's a merger, in that case, all the principles of GAR has already been included in that merger and acquisitions conditions. So there is no need to apply GAR in this. As regard to setting of losses, the provision relating to merger and amalgamation is ready already contains specific anti avoidance safeguards. Therefore, GAR need not to be invoked when SAR is applicable. Though, as per CBD circular dated this, GAR and SAR can coexist. And also, for the second part, in the above facts, let us presume the profit-making company merges with a loss-making company. The results in loss setting of profits, a lower net profit and lower tax liability for both the companies. Can this be examined under GAR? In case of merger of profit-making company with loss-making, there is no specific anti-avoidance safeguards. However, this merger would be under order of High Court. So this has to be approved by the High Court. GAR would not be invoked if the High Court has explicitly and adequately considered tax implications with sanctioning the merger scheme. So this kind of scheme first has to be sanctioned by the High Court, and if High Court gives any direction, that has to be followed. Other than no other conditions will be followed.